Welcome to Freedom of Thought, a podcast by Humanists International, with me, Leon Langdon.
And me, Gary McClelland.
Each week, we'll be discussing news, research, policy developments, and campaigns related to freedom of thought around the world. And this week's guest, Urtė, is from Humanist Ideas Ambassadors, HIA, based out of Lithuania. We have a great conversation with her coming up, so please stick around. Gary, how are you?
I'm well, very busy as we approach the final preparations for the Congress. How about you, Leon? You were in Berlin last week?
I was. I had a really nice time in Berlin, honestly. I hung around generally, but most importantly, I got to meet with some of our colleagues over at HVD. And I think there's just, it's funny you start off mentioning how busy you are at the Congress. I think there's something so lovely about just meeting people in person. I joined Humanists International in September, and those listeners who are involved in our members will know that the World Humanist Congress, or even just the General Assembly, is usually in August. So I joined right after one of those. And it was really, I think, not until, 11 months later that I really got a sense of exactly the depth of what's going on in our members, the complexity, the differences, the similarities. I think there's something so important about these sort of in-person meetings, and to be able to sit down with 3 representatives of HVD last week was just really fantastic for several hours, and just talked about the context in Germany, talked about the stuff they're working on, how we can support them better. I think those conversations, if I could do that every week and sit down with a ton of members, one-on-one for several hours, I think that would be one of the best uses of time long term, but it's just not always possible, I guess.
No, I mean, these type of visits and just spending a bit of in-person time is invaluable. And of course, HVD in Germany is a remarkable organisation. I mean, the sort of breadth and depth of the services that they offer is kind of probably unrivaled in the world, honestly. It's quite incredible. And also, just as a callback to a previous episode, their chief executive, Katrin, is also a psychologist, along with Fish Stark and sort of myself. So and actually the same in Austria. So the growing ranks of psychology-informed humanism.
I feel like it's probably not a new thing. I feel like that has existed for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But I know it's one of the reasons our membership manager, Javan, who many of you will have heard on season 1. If you haven't, you should really go listen to that episode. I think he gets out, several trips a year to visit lots of members across the world. I know you're always visiting members too. And I think it is just so great. It's also just lovely just to sit down, have a coffee and a conversation. And we're so often just emailing people. It's so nice to just talk.
Yeah. And there really is, travel's expensive, and there's obviously a climate impact on it, but there just is no stand-in for having that in-person meeting and that human connection, that human empathy. It really does go a long way.
I know our finance policy does allow a little bit of wiggle room for more expensive trains. We're conscious of that, so
That's true. Yeah. Insofar as it's possible. What else have you been up to, Leon?
We've been up to a lot, honestly. I think one of the sort of more soon-to-be high-profile things we've been working on is we're part of sort of a consultative group, or I don't even know what you'd call it. We're working alongside a couple of different organizations. So some of you, particularly European members, might know we've recently joined something called the Human Rights and Democracy Network, which frankly has given us unrivaled access to some EU institutions. And it's been wonderful. We've been able to brief the European External Action Service, which is effectively the Foreign Office of the EU, before several human rights dialogues. We're, more closely networked with some high-profile NGOs, some NGOs we've long worked with, but also it's just great to have that kind of formalized. But also, due to budget cuts, there's usually an event in December on human rights defenders, which has not gone ahead. And so ourselves, as part of HRDN, alongside the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, alongside some MEPs, alongside the Irish presidency of the EU, and alongside Protect Defenders EU, are coming together to try and get an event organised. So that'll be hopefully in December, over 3 days. Still very early doors on that front, but I think there's some really interesting events being talked about, some side events. I think it's really important. It's something I talk very frequently with Nick Bull, our casework and research manager, about, which is the importance of recognizing humanists and atheists as human rights defenders for standing up for their beliefs, often for standing up for other rights, LGBTI plus rights, reproductive rights, but even just for existing. That often makes them a human rights defender under international definitions of such. But often that's not recognized. And I think on one hand, we need to make sure that we are the ones that we keep pushing that and we keep making sure that others recognize. It's not always the purview of other organizations to really get involved in that, but it's important that we keep pushing that, and when we have opportunities like this, to make sure that is really reinforced.
That's amazing, yeah. And it's really, I think, important for us as an organization to be able to work in these networks and to be able to amplify our voice and our efforts by working in partnership with other NGOs that share our values and our policies. So it's incredible work.
For sure. Now, Gary, just before we came on, you said you just watched your first bit of sport in however long.
Yeah, I think I watched, I think, half of the World Cup final, the latter half, which I think is probably the first time I've sat down to watch football. I mean, at least since I can remember, maybe since I was a child.
I thought you always went to the Celtic Rangers matches. No, that's not your take.
That's not quite my vibe.
Those on the staff team will know I'm a big fan of, honestly, most sports. If there's something on, even if I don't really know what's going on, I'll watch it. But I really didn't think I'd watch much of the World Cup, rightly or wrongly, with everything going on in the US, with the obscene amounts of money going into the football. I didn't think I'd really love it. But I think one of the most interesting things I saw is after the World Cup final. At this point, I realized the World Cup is about a week past. So, we might be a bit late to the party here. But I think there's an interesting point, which was I saw two Twitter accounts, X accounts, posting the exact same video of the Spain World Cup team lifting the trophy. And one was called something like Make America Great Again or MAGA Voice, something like that. And in it, they posted the video where they were talking about how libs don't want you to see this. And it was the video of Trump on stage with the Spanish team. And the claim was basically that the Spanish team really, really wanted him there and were trying to keep him there. Meanwhile, several other sort of left-leaning or Democrat accounts, however you want to describe them, were basically talking about how embarrassing that exact same clip was for Trump. I think there's a really interesting point in there somewhere that I can't say I've fully thought through, but I think it's really shown me that it's not just about disinformation in terms of altered videos and fake videos. It's like we're literally looking at the same thing as many other people and just taking completely different things from it.
There's a very good example showing the sort of the cleavage of the different perspectives on politics, but, without any actual observable difference. It's all hype and spin that's being applied kind of post hoc. Yeah, it's a worrying time. I mean, I think that again goes to the point where we're just talking about the need for appropriate levels of in-person gatherings where people can sit down, have a cup of coffee, look each other in the eyes, use our evolved skills of human empathy and kindness, critical thinking, and sitting. And it is I was listening to a podcast the other day and they spoke about this same phenomenon of, if somebody bumps into you in the street, usually sorry, or which way you're going or whatever. But if somebody cuts you off in the car, shouting and swearing and hitting the horn, because it's a depersonalization, it's a sort of abstraction and a removal of the human experience, which I think can lead to that sort of thing. So anyway, the last advert for the World Humanist Congress that will apply there in the podcast.
Very good. And using your psychology degree very well there, Gareth.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I think this is a good time to pivot to introducing our guest.
Yes.
This week's guest is Urtė Žukauskaitė-Zabuke, who is the co-founder and CEO of Humanist Ideas Ambassadors, HIA, an NGO operating a social enterprise model. HIA pioneered and popularized humanist ceremonies in Lithuania, with humanist ceremonies growing by more than 15% each year since they started in 2024. HIA designed secular, inclusive rituals and published tools and know-how that help people and communities create meaning and are now preparing for expansion across the Baltics and Nordic countries. Urtė, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being with us, Urtė. Maybe we can just start by asking, how did you come to humanism? What brought you to this movement?
My own wedding actually, because my husband and I, we are non-religious, and we were looking for a way to get married. And in Lithuania, there were no options except of civil office and the church wedding. So I searched and searched and searched online until I found humanism and humanist ceremonies in Poland across the border. So I thought, why we cannot do it in Lithuania? So we did. And from my own wedding, we started the whole movement of the ceremonies, and which is now organization.
That's so impressive, Urte, and a really, I guess, lovely way to come to it in such a personal experience, and for your own wedding to be the catalyst for so much happening in Lithuania. I feel like of all of our organizations, you're growing at such pace. How, in your view, do we scale humanism? I feel like that's really what you're kind of doing in Lithuania.
Yeah, because doing this ceremonies, I came from the social entrepreneurship background and working with social organizations. I thought about a model of social entrepreneurship applied to the ceremonies, and that's why our organization have some resources and money to grow from. And I thought, why humanism cannot use the model? Because for me, social entrepreneurship is very, very much in line with the humanist values. Making money not for the profits only, but for making something good in the world. So I thought that if we could systemize what we know and make it applicable in other countries, we can share it. And in that, humanism can grow. And since the 2016, when we started, I traveled to London, where I met HI. At that time, you had the headquarters there. I talked with many humanist organizations around the world, and what I noticed, they all have great projects, they all have great ideas going on, but they are running locally. And if we could find a way to share those ideas, not only philosophically, not only like talking, but also systemizing it into systems and into projects which can be taken and applied right away, then I think we could grow much faster, because somebody already did mistakes, so why do it again?
And Urte, would you say, I mean, it's obvious that Haya has really been at the forefront of developing humanist services in Lithuania. And how important would you say it is to be able to offer these services? I guess like what you were looking for when you got married. How important is the role of services in humanism?
I think that's the main thing, and I think we should look what else we could provide. That's why we went from saying we provide ceremonies to saying we provide tools to make meanings, because it might be workshops, it might be, I don't know, conversation cards, it might be ceremonies, it might be chaplaincy, whatever. But those are all the tools to make meaning in this world where we need to create it that ourselves. And many people does not have the tools. They go to the pseudoscience, they go to other alternatives which are easily achievable and accessible. So I'm thinking about how to create something as accessible as the other alternatives which are in the world, but which would be based on the humanist values.
And Urte, how do we get that out there? I really love the idea. You know, I think obviously I work in advocacy and policy, and I look at the world, and I think offering a vision like you describe of something, an alternative to pseudoscience, an alternative to the fear-based stuff that we see, is so admirable. How in your view do we do that with ceremonies, beyond ceremonies?
I think we should look at the market, and we should look how other businesses doing, what they are using and how they are doing, and just to present the idea for people so they want to have the service. And to create value is to build something valuable. And with that, I think, first of all, is just an idea. When we started, we didn't had like how we will do it. We had why we are doing it. And we said we can help if you want the same service. And when we sold our first ceremony, we didn't had the exact plan how we will do it. We only knew that we want to help in this sphere. And when we got the first clients, we learned on the way. And I think in all the humanist services, it can be done in a similar way. You do not have to have all the answers up front. You should know the problem you are solving, then if people coming to you with a problem, then it's already a win. When we started, it was very, very low prices just to learn, just to get the experience. And now we are top proposition in market. We promoted the word humanism so much that people use it now without basically knowing truly what it means in some ways, because it's so popular. Like if it's not a church wedding and if it's not a civil wedding, everyone is calling the ceremonies humanists, which is plus of our work, but already also a minus, because we need to educate people now and explain what it is and so on. But now the news are spreading with the social media, with the people talking with each other. In each ceremony, there are minimum 50, 60 guests who are spreading the messages. And what happened in like 5-6 years, we built the audience, we build like ceremony numbers, and we could start the advocacy. Before, of course, we worked so hard just to provide the service, but now we have like a little bit empty hands and we can start advocating. We have already the proof that it's needed in the society. And that's why last year we did the first international conference in our parliament, bringing humanism as a life stance, not only the ceremonies, into the discussion. This year we collected 21 nice stories from the ceremonies with the pictures, with the descriptions, and we made a photo exhibition, which we use as an advocacy tool. And the first, it premiered also in our parliament and was presented on the day of humanism, World Humanism Day, with the press conference. And it was also a first press conference talking about humanist ceremonies and non-religious life stances, not only humanism, but all non-religious life stances, which are not recognized in Lithuania in the same way as religious life stances are. One of the examples are registration of the marriages, and we are going our way to advocate for that.
Thanks, Urtė. It's really interesting when you talk about the sort of large increase in the demand for humanist services, because where I'm from in Scotland, obviously we've had humanist marriage now for, I don't know, about 10 years, and it's now kind of the default way for people to get married. There's more humanist weddings every year in Scotland than there are church weddings, and it's become a real cultural part of the way people celebrate love in Scotland, which I think is really beautiful. But obviously it wasn't always like that. Wedding ceremonies were dominated by the church for many years, and I don't know to what extent the rise of humanist ceremonies in Scotland was a causal factor or a consequence of other changes, but it's been a very interesting sort of shift demographically as well. But I wonder if you could just tell us a bit more about the situation in Lithuania and the kind of the factors that are surrounding these changes that you're talking about.
Yeah, so the background in Lithuania, like we are independent now for 34 years, and before we were part of the Soviet Union, so atheism was forced onto people. There were no freedom in religion at all. That's why the church had a huge role in freeing our country. But at the same time, atheism got denied at all. And now people who are calling themselves atheists are sometimes still called communists because of that. And because Soviet Union did so much harm to Lithuania, we have this very bad outlook to atheism as well. That's why I think it's useful to have other non-religious life stances as skepticism, as humanism, and so on. There were always in Lithuania part of non-believers, and it's growing, even though the official statistics are that we are 80% Catholic. From the marriage numbers, for example, we see that only 30% of marriages are done in the churches, and around 5% are done in a humanist way. Others are done in the civil registry. From the, for example, choice in the schools, we have a choice to choose ethics or religious classes. Around 50% of kids or the families choose the ethics class. So we have this statistics which denies each other basically, and religiosity or beliefs were always very private in Lithuania due to the political context, but I think also because of our culture. We do not talk in the public what we believe in our homes. Even in human rights field, non-religiosity wasn't taken as a basically separate human right which has a separate attention. So when 2 years ago we joined a human rights coalition, our goal was to bring this topic into the human rights field, first of all, because we always talk about freedom of belief. But in this talk, freedom of non-belief is usually forgotten. So our goal entering there was to also talk about it, talk about this part, and look for the ways to advocate it. And I think that's one of the ways to scale humanism, actually, to have strong partnerships and to partner with other NGOs and other strong organizations which have the same values. And it's been very successful for us because this year we are chairing the Human Rights Coalition. And it opened us a lot of doors because when there are trustable organizations together with you, it gives you, of course, some authority.
There's so many threads there that I'd love to pick up on that we just simply don't have time for. I guess it's so interesting to me hearing, honestly, the parallels from Gary talks about Scotland, Ireland, where I'm from. There are so many parallels between, some statistics that talk about high religiosity, then some which really sort of betray that and sort of show maybe underlying intentions beneath that. But I think to pick up on networking, I think the Human Rights Coalition you're part of sounds really interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, you're currently chairing it, but also picking up off networking as well. I'd love to, if you could talk a little bit about being networked with other humanist organizations. I think the work that you're doing there and the experience you're sharing with members of Humanist International through different networks, I think is really impressive.
Yeah, so the first connection we got was with the Norwegian organization. They invited us over to Oslo and to see how the organizations are built and to learn about the democratic organizations and so on. And from that, more of our international work started, I think. But also, as I said, just traveling around, I tried to find a humanist organization. And for example, when I went for holiday in London, I met with Humanist International. When I went to holiday in Malta, I met with Humanist in Malta. And I love this way of interacting and getting to know people in different parts of the world. But at the same time, we always thought that we have a knowledge of the social entrepreneurship and how to systemize and build things. So last year, we did this accelerator for the 4 countries in the world from Humanist International members on how to start their own startups of the humanist ceremonies. And this year, Peru will be in the World Humanist Congress. They won the accelerator, and with our mentorship and huge work they put themselves in, they are now having the first clients coming to them, and I'm very happy for that. Because that's what I think is the most important, to share what you have the best of your knowledge, and just to try to connect and have partnerships which grow with each one putting something in. Also, we are part of EHSN group, and currently we were mostly working on the ceremonies, but we are now starting to work with the education and chaplaincy. It grows from a little bit, and it's very interesting how one doors open another. Because, for example, we thought, okay, we need to advocate a little bit more for chaplaincy, and in the conference in the parliament, there was like the Belgium Art Forces General who was speaking about the ceremonies and how they are used in chaplaincy. And now when we made the photo exhibition, there was one couple who are both in the military. So basically we are using also the ceremonies and the nice stories from the ceremonies to say that they are needed and useful in different contexts. So, of course, we do not have chaplaincy yet in Lithuania, but it's the first steps to bringing at least knowledge. And for me, the most valuable thing is that people from the inside of the military are writing us and thanking us that we are bringing the message, because many of them, they are still afraid to speak and to say that they need different services and different care. So, yeah, sorry, I just rerouted the question, but I think the international networks are very, very important for the advocacy locally as well. Because when we organized the conference, it was so easy because I knew all the people and I knew who can talk about what. And it was much, much easier to do something in Lithuania with international help.
Thank you so much, Urtė. That's really, really helpful. And on the topic of international partnerships, we should remind our listeners and our viewers that they will be able to meet you and ask you more questions in probably just over a week's time, by the time this podcast goes live, in Ottawa at the 2026 World Humanist Congress, which we look forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. As we come towards the end, Urtė, is there any last messages you would have for our listeners who tend to be the leaders of humanist organisations around the world, and sometimes individual humanists in countries where there is no organisation, but what would be your final messages to them?
My final message is dream about the world you want to create and share those dreams so people could join and we can create together.
Beautiful.
It's really lovely. Thank you so much, Urtė. It's been really great to have you on.
See you soon in Ottawa.
Yeah, see you soon.
If you found this episode useful, please share it with others, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a rating and a 5-star review. It makes a big difference in helping new listeners find the show. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or someone you'd like to suggest as a guest, you can contact us via the links in the show notes. To find out more or join Humanists International, visit humanists.international and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you to our producer James and the team at Humanize Live, and of course the team at Humanists International, without whom we'd have very little to talk about. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom of Thought.